Metroid Prime 4 would have been a killer Wii U exclusive. So many of the game's choices feels like a callback to when Nintendo was first dipping its toes into the world of HD gaming. Now, I know this game had a really troubled development. I want to say it was announced in 2017, didn't come out till 2025, so it's been in development in one way, shape, or the other for 8 years. It was originally going to be made by Bandai Namco, but then midway through production, they shut it down and then sent it off to Retro Studios, who developed the OG games. Now, I was a little excited for this game. My expectations were tempered, accounting for that development time, but playing Metroid Prime Remastered on the Switch really reminded me how fun these games are. I was really excited for a new entry in the series. This is why I bought a Switch 2, real talk. So, playing it, it's not a bad game. We'll get that out of the way. I don't think it's a outright bad game. It's functional, it works, it does have fun moments, but it is just a strange one. So first let's get into what Metroid Prime 4 does well. As I mentioned, it had a troubled development, but it definitely came out of the other side leaning more towards Final Fantasy 15 than Aliens Colonial Marines in terms of its quality. It's functional, it has a fantastic art style, and there are moments that give you that classic Metroid Prime feel. Exploring Fury Green was pretty cool at the start. I know there was a lot of hubbub about the inclusion of Miles McKenzie during those early stages, but he very much just becomes a sporadic figure as you go through the game. But once you get out of Fury Green into the main world, I like to think that the Vault Forge, Ice Tower, and Flare Pool are very, solid Metroid Prime levels. I had a lot of fun going through them, exploring all the secrets, getting the unlocks, backtracking, really trying to clear the areas. Like, they did give me that particular kind of thrill once I was really into, the meat of the game. I mean, yeah, that's about it on the pros. It's serviceable Metroid, if you're looking for just some meat and potatoes Metroid Prime, it does that at quite a few moments, but it also does a lot of other stuff that's just weird. I know there was an interview with one of the lead developers. He said that by virtue of how troubled the development was, Metroid Prime couldn't really keep up with the way open world and action games have changed. But a lot of the things they try to do are dated even for when this game was originally announced. I mean, they announced it the same year Breath of the Wild came out, which was a more minimalist take on the open world game, but that came off as revolutionary considering how bloated the genre became. Metroid Prime 4's take doesn't really have that, intentional minimalism. It just kind of feels like baby's first attempt at an open world game, which is what's giving it that Wii U vibe. Had this game came out 2013, 2014, probably would have done alright, and it probably would have been more forgivable how sparse the open world, the Soul Valley area is. But as it stands, it's just very strange, because a hallmark of the Metroid Prime games and the Metroid games in general is backtracking. You get a new shot, a new skill, and that makes you go back to other areas to unlock the little places you couldn't get to without that skill. And there's still a lot of that in this game, but when you unlock something in the Ice Tower, now you gotta drive through this barren, empty desert to get to the Vault Forge so you can go through there. It just adds more time and makes it feel more of a time sink than it should. I feel like this would have been a solid 8 to 10 hour game that just got stretched to around 15-20s by virtue of just how much time is wasted in that open world. There's also these dungeons littered around the open world that I thought were cool when I first found them, because it's how you get some of the more charge shots. There's occasionally upgrades for your suit in them, but the puzzles are really easy. There's not that challenge that you would get in some of the dungeons in Breath of the Wild. I was really expecting okay, this is gonna be I'm gonna have to really put my brain to the test here. I did not have to put my brain to the test here. It was pretty damn easy to get most of those unlocks. There's also these little like army bases that got swept up in the wave that brought you to Viros in the beginning of the game that you find throughout the area, and some of them give you upgrades, and then some of them give you mech parts that you can't use until the very end of the game. Also, with the inclusion of, a lot of voiced non-playable Federation soldiers, the narrative is more pronounced here, but its focus is very scattered. Like, you learn the history of the Lemorn, the dead race that once populated Viros. You're learning more about the Federation soldiers you're stranded with on Viros. And then also Sylux shows up at random times. This game is a real waste of Sylux, whose backstory you only learn by 100%ing the game. I just think that he would appear at random times, but he just didn't really make much of an impact because he was so infrequent. And because the guys only popped up here and there in previous Metroid Prime games, I was really hoping that he was going to really come to the forefront here, and we were going to, he's really going to ascend to like a peak Metroid villain. And I don't feel like that really happened with this game, which is strange because like so much of the game feels like it's built around enticing newcomers, but it does little to fill in the blanks of who Sylux is for anyone who this could very well be their first Metroid game. So I think his inclusion is just really flat, and I think making him more of a focus would have enhanced the story and made it just much more interesting to engage with. Like, as you're learning about the Lemorn and how they died and like what happened to them, I think it'd have been cool if you have a dual narrative showing Sylux basically learning the same things, but is taking this insane Lemorn technology and trying to enhance himself with it to kill Samus or something to that nature. I feel like that's kind of implied here, but we don't really get a lot of it. The dude just shows up here and there, and I just, it didn't do anything for me. I was just like, oh dang, like, he's the big boss at the end, and it's a pretty okay boss fight, but I didn't feel anything. Also, the inclusion of more NPC characters makes the first phase of that final boss fight a bitch to deal with, because you're charged with having to heal them. And like, no matter what, as soon as you have to heal one of them, Sylux is gonna come through with some unblockable attack, and you can't really move while you're healing them. Like, you can strafe, but you can't really evade. So you're inevitably going to take damage trying to heal these NPCs who aren't really doing much to help with the fight. Also, the use of NPCs are weird, because how the game ultimately ends, it makes Samus feel a little bit ineffectual in the finale. And also, she kind of comes off as a bit of an asshole through the course of the game by virtue of being a silent protagonist, because she always has been. But there are so many moments where people are just yapping at Samus, and she gives no real response, no real physical indicator, and I'm just like, damn, like, we love an autistic baddie, but like, at what point? Use some words here. Also, I just feel like the focus on, like, I learned more about the Federation soldier Takabi than I did about Sylux in this whole game, which just goes to show how strange some of the focus is in Metroid Prime 4. It's just like, it's a weird game. Like, I'd give it like a 6 on like a scale from 1 to 10. I think it's pretty okay. There are moments that are fun, but it's just odd. Like, even the shooting doesn't feel that good, and a lot of the combat scenarios are just taking down wave after wave of enemy. I was hoping there would just be a bit more, like it would push Metroid Prime into something new, but this feels like it's just holding on to some old gameplay elements that haven't exactly aged the best, while also pulling in just questionable newer gameplay elements for something that just kind of feels like, I don't know, Diet Metroid Prime, Like, the flavor's there. I can tell I'm playing a Metroid Prime game, but it's just not hitting the way it should. And I hope that with Metroid Prime 4 kind of being what it is and how they finally got out the door, that we do get like a proper Metroid Prime 5 that pushes the franchise forward. Because, like, I haven't played Metroid Dread personally, but, you know, I do remember the chatter about it, and I do know that it did push forward, you know, the side-scrolling Metroid games in some really cool ways and help modernize it. I hope if they do another Metroid entry that it's more in that vein, and that it doesn't have as much of a troubled development cycle. I'm hoping that having gotten their hands on the Switch 2, having gotten their hands on just sort of this new technology, they can actually build a proper new Metroid Prime game that successfully reimagines the franchise for the modern era. Because it's just like, you know, I can deal with some of the data mechanics in Metroid Prime Remastered because it's a 20-something-year-old game. I don't really want to be dealing with those in a game that just came out 2 months ago. So that does it for me today. I wish I liked Metroid Prime 4 more than I did. I'm not mad that I got it for Christmas. It was still fun. It definitely, you know, I wouldn't recommend buying a Switch 2 for it. But that said, you know, I'm happy we got it. I'm happy it's finally out in the world. It's not a train wreck. It's just significantly flawed. And I don't know. I think some of the criticism has been a bit hyperbolic about it. It's not the worst game ever. It's probably the weakest of the Metroid Prime games. But it does do some cool stuff. Like the psychic powers. I forgot to mention those earlier. The psychic powers are pretty fun and a pretty cool new addition to Samus's arsenal. So I would like to see some of that stuff, you know, really get extrapolated upon in a sequel, especially the way the game ends. Like, I feel like there's just make a Metroid Prime 5 and really just make it the Silex game and just drive home that story. So now that does it for me today. Thanks for listening. I'll see you in the next video.